Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this week's edition of the PD16 Perspective. I am your host, John Reid, and I want to thank the LCPM network for making this all possible, and for each of you who have come and allowed us to your homes, where we want to speak the truth and disarm the weapons of mass distraction. In this week's episode, we talk about how a local Stafford County indigenous tribe, they finally get the opportunity to be represented in the way they should be. We're also going to talk about students being empowered and having a voice in state education. Also, we're going to be talking about an issue that often isn't discussed in underserved communities, and that's about urban deserts and how there's a potential study that could create within PD16. And then finally, as although Women's History Month has concluded, we still want to give a chance to shout out some of those amazing women who have made a difference within the local communities. So join us for this week's edition of the PD16 Perspective. Recently, there's a new state fund that was proposed that passed in the House of the Virginia General Assembly. And I want to read this story and what it entails. It's coming, I thank WFSR in Richmond for the story. And what it talks about is the Potawatomi tribe, and I really hope I'm saying that correctly. And the tribe that it allows them to reacquire tribal land and help protect battlefield sites throughout the states. And why is that so important? Is because it also impacts for Black soldiers who fought and died in several wars, from the American Revolutionary War to the Civil War. It gives them an opportunity to have their lands protected. And this has been a long-going issue. And I want to kind of just read the press release here in the story. According to the story, the goal of the tribe is to obtain land in Crow's Nest, which is Crow's Nest located in Stafford County. And the Delegate Dolores McQuinn, a Democrat from Richmond, she introduced House Bill 141, which is needing to get grant funding for what's called the Virginia Historic Preservation Fund. And so that's going to protect the indigenous people of color and give them an opportunity to have their lands protected. Now, this is also important to note why this bill had to pass, because you've seen there, of course, throughout the state of Virginia, there are other historical sites. However, they meet the qualifications in order for them to get the protection that you need as a historical site. And so what this fund is going to do is it's going to also help, I said, preserve areas where Black soldiers fought in these wars. And the thing is, these sites have not been protected. And the fact that we're still dealing with this issue in 2022 really speaks volumes. And so credit to Delegate McQuinn and for those who have helped her to make this process possible. And one of the things we want to really just shout out is the fact what this bill is going to do. And the Potawatomi tribe, they're going to develop a museum that's going to be out hopefully by mid to late July, and is going to honor their legacy. And I think one thing this fund also has done is it follows through on a promise that former Governor Ralph Northam wanted to see come to pass. He wanted to preserve $10 million over the next couple of years to help tribes with that nature, to make sure that although the budget has not been finalized, and that leaves kind of a bigger issue. And one of the things with parents, when they talk with the governor about Governor Youngkin about this, that there will be an opportunity to consider this, that there won't be any changes to the budget that will impact people of color and indigenous tribes, to allow them to have their rightful land, to be able to have places like Crow's Nest in Stafford County. And this could be monumental. I mean, we've seen over the past several years, people of indigenous tribes be able to get not only just get recognized, but for example, one of the things in Prince William County, where a sister publication, PW Perspective, serves, Delegate Elizabeth Guzman, who's very pushed for and made a law that allows for children of indigenous tribes to be able to be excused from one day from school, for public schools, to attend powwows of the native tribes. And so that's important. It's important to recognize those tribes and recognize their history. And you can go throughout history. You can see from, if you go back to the Trail of Tears, how this country has just continued to disrespect, indigenous people. And so this is going to be wonderful, a great way and to honor them. And then another thing that was going to do is kind of bypass some of those qualifications and allow indigenous tribes and people of color and Black soldiers to be recognized, because there's so many of them whose names you don't see in movies like Glory, you don't get a chance to hear about during Black History Month or any other time. But it's going to give them an opportunity to be recognized. And so we would like to thank the Delegate Doris McQuinn for this opportunity to make sure that House Bill 141 gets passed, signed on the governor's desk, and get put in the law, and that they will be able to get the money necessary, because this is a way we honor our past. And for those who honor the past can see the future. Virginia students are pretty soon going to be able to have their voices heard under a new state law that's going to create a student advisory board. I'm going to read this. A new student advisory board to the State Board of Education that's now headed to the governor's desk for a signature. It's slated to take effect in July of this year. And why that's so important, starting next school year, a group of students will craft policy recommendations for the Commonwealth. And this is a much needed step in terms of education decisions being made. In certain counties, you always have a student representative, and those students representatives are able to speak on the things that impact them most, because it's the students that are impacted more than anyone. It's the students that have to have their voices heard, because they're the ones going to classes every day. They're the ones who are saying, hey, if we're the ones who are being, having to take in this curriculum, then we need to have a say in it. That's long overdue. And we've talked about on this show often, the situation with the Keys versus Stafford, or the Spotsylvania County School Board petition. And when you see bills such as this student advisory board, it's going to open up the door. It's going to open up the door for students to be able to speak on these issues, not just show up at, say, for example, a school board hearing, but in addition to that, make their voices known. So I'm going to read a little more about that. Students are it says once this applies, students will have an opportunity to apply, and then also the governor will appoint 8 students to the board, one from each Virginia Department of Education superintendent region. Then the board will meet multiple times a year and present their policy recommendations to the state board at least annually. Wow, that is an amazing step. And why is that an amazing step? Is because, again, it's going to empower our students, and we need minority representation. So once it's become law, encourage, this is not going to be all homogenous either, because we don't talk about this often, but in the community, especially in PD16, there are significant issues in our educational system, and we've seen it. There's continued to be this push to talk about quote unquote divisive concepts, and you can see how the language has evolved. It's going further away from teaching Virginia about its true past, and to a lesser extent, this entire nation. And so we need to have diverse representation on there, so that diverse voices can be heard, diverse voices can be pushed into action. And you've seen the impact, again, when we talk about with the Keys case, and that's still going on, that you've seen the difference when we have those voices who are bold enough. Because let's be realistic, we don't get involved as much in the school boards, in underserved communities. We often say, oh, we'll lead, or maybe one or two from different areas, but it often will not be a collective. And it needs to be that in order for things to be heard, for things to be done, and for these school board representatives to know that it's not just one set of group of people, but because that's all they see, whether it's the Board of County Supervisors, where there is at public hearings, whether it's such as the school board. People want to see different voices represent. So we got to go beyond just, in-house meetings on Zoom and go out and let our voices be heard. There's so many more people like Michaela Keys and so many other people speaking out for truth, to let them know, hey, these things are not right in our school system. So let's make sure that we get out, because if we don't, the rules from the student school board to the superintendents will all be the same. And history has shown what happens when they have just one culture representing, just one group of people representing, or with a sprinkle here and there. But the problems it will create have long-lasting effects. And these are the things we need to have, because if we want to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can't just have them, not just in our laws, but for the people who will speak up for them. Virginia Senate District 27 is about to get a new hat into the ring. And if you've been on this show, one of our first interviews was with Benjamin Litchfield, who was an HBCU grad and a lawyer who's running on the Democratic committee ticket. Now, rumor has it that Delegate Durant, who won surprisingly over Joshua Cole in last November's election and won the 28th district, is now making a plan to run. And of course, just read this announcement here. Her decision says help Republicans gain a Senate majority that will help Governor Youngkin establish his statewide goals of lowering taxes, funding, and quote, quote, improving schools. Now, we all know since the Youngkin administration, we know what their idea of improving schools is all about. And one thing's for sure, that if this happens, that there will be multiple people who will be impacted. And so these are the things that we want to talk about. And you have to know who represents and who's running in those districts, so get informed. And so talking about what's been taking place in our school districts and in our representatives, also when it comes to lowering taxes, but also limiting the effect of government as well. And so we certainly love to have Delegate Durant come on the show and talk about it. We want to be equal to all voices, to give them a platform so they can be heard. Because we know when you watch this show, it goes out to people in the neighborhood and in the communities. And we also want to make sure that everyone who runs gets their chance to shine, so that they just don't feel that they're in a silo, but that they also get to speak. So we definitely invite Delegate Durant, and we invite anyone who is running in those districts, because you need to be able to know who is running and know the issues that matter to them. So it doesn't just become just political speak, but it gives them an opportunity to be heard. So we definitely invite her to come on this program. And again, this is running for the 27th district. And also go back to our first episode where we talk about redistricting and why it's so important. So, earlier this week, we were attending a Senate confirmation, and where someone was making their announcement that they were going to run for a state Senate. And one of the first questions came up is, well, what district are you running and what are the areas? There's still a lot of people who don't know about where they stand. And again, check out our first episode. It explains it in full detail, or you can go into our PD16 Perspective Facebook page where you can check that out and be able to know more about the people that are running in your area and where you can vote. One of the major issues that often isn't talked about in underserved communities is about urban deserts. And for those who may not know, when you talk about urban desert, we're talking about a population that often has to deal with the lack of green spaces and environmental improvements that leads to higher degree change. Let me give a recent report that just came out it was a group that represents Virginia's independent colleges and universities, and how hotter paved over areas lacking green spaces can have, somewhat upwards as big as 10-degree difference in different parts. Now, this heat mapping effort, which was founded by Virginia Foundation for Independent Colleges, it is challenging local government to the data need to tackle these heat-related issues. And this is a problem because, especially in urban communities, we see this happening a lot, where you have a lot more pavement and a lot less trees. You have a lot more buildings, but you don't have the green spaces. And there's no surprise that there's a correlation. There's a direct correlation between those heat deserts, urban deserts, and also the number of health issues, with hypertension, with stroke, with issues that, like I said, high blood pressure, and especially in the summertime where people have exhaustion more because there's not those areas to protect them, because things are being torn down for new businesses that come apart. And so what this study is showing, because we know that communities of color are disproportionately affected, because we don't really talk about it. When's the last time, let's be honest, when's the last time you've talk with your family about getting solar panels? When's the last time your family, hey, we need more trees here, or we need more greenhouses? When's the last time talking about more gardens being built? Because it's not discussed. And so we just allow paving to take place and say it's in the name of progress. We got to be very careful about that, because as this study shows, no, first, the climate change issue is a real thing. But if we don't address it, again, this is where you talk to your Board of County supervisors and try to get more information about the environment. I implore, if you live for those who live in a PD16 area, listening area, talk to representatives, see what can be done about getting green spaces, about what can be done to environmentally help, because these issues do affect our children as well. And also what it does, it opens up the door, because for more coal mining companies and things of that nature and environmental waste to come in. It's not surprising a lot of polluting plants are closely, closely located to communities of color. So this is an opportunity. So I wanted to put the study out tonight so you can understand the impact, and just to be able to speak to your local representatives, get to know your local representatives, and let your voices be heard, because these are the kind of things that impact not only our community, but it can impact our children and future generations to come. Finally tonight, in this week's episode, by the time we're filming this or we're seeing this, that we're past Women's History Month. That was in March. But that being said, I want to give a shout out and for one of the people who helps us make this program possible, Jenna Edwards, and wrote a powerful article, and just to read about some of the women who have made Fredericksburg what it is and really making a voice in the community. And so I want to give them a quick shout out in the few minutes we have here and talk about, for the Taste of Fredericksburg Facebook group with Left Nora Brooks, and also business owners such as Ricky and Leith Vera of Christina Filipino Restaurant. We want to make sure to represent them. Nisha and Tracy Hall of the Virginia Black Business Directory, a major resource. If you are a Black-owned business, you definitely want to talk with them and get connected and go on their site, learn more about it, BBD.org, and learn how you can get set up to be a part of that and let your business be known. Yana Henry of Fredericksburg Pride, representing for the LGBTQIA plus community. And one of the things that we're starting to see with Fredericksburg is that it's starting to embrace more diversity. It's starting to embrace different ideologies, different mindsets, different lifestyles. And so shout out, remember making that possible, Danielle Acosta of Latinos in Fredericksburg Entertainment. And so, again, it's embracing the diversity in PD16. So definitely got this word as well. And also for D. Stinson as well, make sure of Hope City Church. And also for Lisa Harris and her husband, we found the Christian-based transitions for you. And what that is to eliminate homelessness in Fredericksburg. And so, go on to our PD16 Perspective site. Make sure to check out this website. You guys, other resources we may have missed. Church to a head, not the heart, but also you get an opportunity to celebrate these wonderful women. And you are a woman who has a story and definitely share it. Contact us through our PD16 Perspective Facebook page and let your voices be heard. We definitely want to share your story. Well, that's it for this week's edition of the PD16 Perspective. I'm John Reid. Again, we'd like to thank the LCPM Network for making this all possible, and for you for allowing us into your homes. This show will broadcast every Monday, starting at 9:00 a.m. And until next time, again, always remember, you have a voice in democracy. Have a good